Good morning, everyone. I was looking back on some of the other discussions we've had over the last 6 weeks and recalled that we started off with a conversation around self-love in the time of COVID-19 and taking care of ourselves. So try to continue to take care of yourselves and move around a little bit. Remember to get up and stretch and get outdoors and get a little fresh air, even though it's warm out. The mornings are still cool. And so, as always, I'm really grateful for all of you who have shown up this morning to share your time with me. I thought we just talk a little bit about executive function and social emotional learning. I know that these discussions are generally about perspective. And so it means a lot for me to share with you a little bit about how I arrived in this work, looking at our body's natural tendencies to sort of navigate the complexities of our day-to-day life. And I want us to remember always in the work that you do in your personal lives, and particularly with respect to this whole teacher-led governance structure, that you all are on this journey together, and that the path really is the goal. And so I know that's difficult perspective to take sometime, especially when things are challenging and sticky and messy and difficult. And so several years ago, I attended a public health conference, of all places, at the Phoenix Zoo. And it was about 5 years ago, right around this time. And Marcia Stanton from the Phoenix Children's Hospital presented about the ACEs research. And I know everyone's familiar with the ACEs research. I sent out a little survey to sort of get a temperature check on everyone's interest in doing a deeper dive into that. And so I didn't get a lot of response. So I just want to share with you a little bit how this moment was pivotal in my life and why, and how for me now, I can't separate understanding this body of science and how it has impacted all aspects of my understanding of social emotional health and well-being, and then of course physical health and social function across the lifespan. And so most of you are familiar, all of you are familiar with the ACEs science. It was conducted in the mid-90s. Kaiser Permanente and the CDC partnered up and conducted a very large-scale public health study looking at the impact of adverse experiences in childhood on health across the lifespan. And so 17,500 patients, all part of Kaiser Permanente, receiving healthcare out there, were surveyed about 10 specific indicators of adversity in their childhoods. And so what they found out was that the more experiences of ongoing stress that an individual had in their childhoods impacted proportionally their health across the lifespan, right? And so this study was born out of the obesity clinic at Kaiser. And at the time, Dr. Felitti, an internist there, was running a major obesity clinic. And by chance, really, he found a connection between his patients' early life experiences and their physical health outcomes. And so this study really became the first large-scale public health study looking at what we call social determinants of health, right? What is it about our environment that has an impact on not only our social and emotional health and well-being, but our physical health and social function? And so understanding that it's not the experience per se that impacts the trajectory of these circumstances, but it's sort of the chronic stimulation of our body's stress response system over time that really has an influence on our overall health and well-being. And so if we remember back several weeks ago, I showed you the still face experiment video. And the reason that that video is so profound is it really gets to this idea of when we are experiencing stress, whether it's a, a threat to our physical safety or a threat to our emotional safety, our body responds automatically to that. We don't think about it, right? Our autonomic nervous system kicks in and gets us ready to deal with that threat. And when we think about that deeply and often, it really applies to so much that goes on in our day-to-day lives and our relationships. And for me now, I can't separate anything from really looking at this idea of what is happening in our bodies and our brains each and every day, all day long, that potentially interferes with our ability to really access the part of our brain that we need to think logically, to plan, to organize thoughts and information, and to take perspective, right? So this idea of perspective is regulated by a part of our brain that's only functioning when we are in a calm state, right? And so thinking about this really has helped me in my own personal life understand what it is that makes me uncomfortable, and then what are my habitual responses to that discomfort, right? And how do they either help me or hurt me in the situation that I'm in? And so this image comes off of Harvard Center on the Developing Child's website, and I think is really powerful because in our day-to-day lives, we are responding to stimuli at all times as an alive organism, right? We are responding to stimulus in our environment. And then our body naturally deals with that stressor or stimulus, right? And only when we are able to pay attention to what's going on in our body when our stress response system's stimulated, are we able to then intentionally self-regulate, right? So our ability to self-regulate is not a given, right? We have to work on that. We have to develop skills. And the first thing we have to do is understand what it feels like when we are feeling stressed out. So this video, again, comes from Harvard Center on the Developing Child. I'll always refer you back to this website that's full of so much great information. So this one happens to be specifically on executive function and the skills for life and learning.
Science tells us that brains, minds, are built, not born. And at the center of this dynamic architecture are a set of skills called executive function and self-regulation.
Children's self-regulation and executive function are key ingredients in their lifetime performance. It's not just about learning language or learning numbers or learning colors. We have to be able to work effectively with others, with distractions, with multiple demands. These actually are skills that contribute to the productivity of the American workforce.
Look at your shapes. What should you have done next?
Educators, I think, are looking for just this sort of thing. And when we describe what we mean by executive function, they say, yes, that's it. That's exactly, the problem. These kids, they can tell me these rules, but they can't actually use them.
What's this?
A tool.
What is executive function?
Safety goggles.
Probably the best way to think about it is sort of like an air traffic control system in the brain. Just like an air traffic control system has to manage lots of airplanes going on lots of runways and really exquisite timing and so on. A child has to manage a lot of information, avoid distractions. We really think of it as involving working memory and inhibitory control and mental flexibility. Take a situation where a child is having to take turns. So first of all, the child has to have inhibitory control. The child has to be able to stop whatever he or she is doing and let the other child take a turn. Cute. But when it's your turn again, you also have to remember what it is you're supposed to be doing. So that pulls on working memory. If the children who are taking the turns after you do something unpredictable, you have to be able to adjust what you're going to do next. And that requires mental flexibility. Children who are struggling with these capacities often look like children who just aren't paying attention, or children who are deliberately not controlling themselves.
If you don't have self-regulation, you act out and the teacher puts you in timeout, and so then you miss part of the learning that's going on, and then you are more upset because you're behind, and so you act out, and so you get this downward spiral.
How does executive function develop?
6, 7, 7, and +4.
In little children, and even in the infant and toddler years, you begin to see the roots of executive functioning skills. What's going on in our brains is unbelievably intricate and complicated.
The prefrontal cortex, or the front third of the brain, is important for executive function. But it's more than just prefrontal cortex. This region doesn't act alone. It's involved in controlling your behavior through its interactions with all other parts of the brain. The brain goes from a situation where you've got nearest neurons communicating very strongly with each other and ignoring the rest of the brain, to these widespread networks that are connecting these different areas. Executive function changes over the life course. It improves radically over the first few years.
I got a max prime.
It continues to improve throughout adolescence. It's not until early adulthood that you have the adult type networks that are very strongly activated that connect different brain regions together.
Let's take notes.
Also, we believe that executive functions can be trained.
It's just like going to the gym. So the more you practice in these areas, the stronger the capacity is likely to become, because you're helping to strengthen those neural connections.
You're at 24.
Slowly but surely, you're going to be able to step back, and that child's going to go into the world with these skills where they can get along with other people, change rules, and they can be flexible, and they can accomplish new things, and they're unafraid.
I got bit by my dog in my arm. Oh dear.
If we don't learn these skills during the childhood and adolescent years when they're coming online, we are really ill-equipped as an adult to hold a job, to maintain a marriage, to raise children, to get along with each other, to basically be part of a civil society.
You're okay.
Okay, so I love revisiting this video often, because it reminds me that, first of all, these capacities, I think the word capacity is really important. These capacities are only accessible to us when we are in a relatively calm state, right? And so executive function includes these things, as the video stated: inhibitory control, working memory, mental flexibility, right? And they allow us to do things like plan, focus our attention, juggle multiple tasks successfully, and take perspective, right? So when we think about all of the things that we're trying to do in education, really, executive function and these capacities are imperative to the work that we do. And the reality is that not all of the students that we're working with have had experiences and have been exposed to environments that really strengthen this set of capacities, right? And so when we think about social emotional learning, it really involves being able to strengthen executive function at any age, right? Whether it be in our elementary and middle school children, and also in our students in the high school space, right? So we know that the ability to really strengthen the neural connections in our children's brain during adolescence is really powerful, right? So birth to 5 and 11 to 17 are the times in our human life when our brains are the most plastic, right? The most rapid change is going on. Right? So we really have the capacity during these years to make a huge impact on strengthening these skills. And so again, from Harvard's website, we can remember that our body is going to respond automatically. We don't have control over everything that happens, right? Until we start to pay attention and build skills to interrupt our habitual response, right? Only then do we have access to those sort of prefrontal cortex functions. And I think that in theory, this all sounds great, right? We can know this in theory, but then in reality, in our day-to-day lives, in our relationships, in our conversations, in classrooms, and with parents and families, it's much more difficult to be able to step back in challenging circumstances and remember this, right? So this doesn't only apply to how we teach, right? Or the lessons that we give. It applies a lot to our own selves as well, right? And so this is a great resource that will be included on the resource list. So this also comes from Harvard's website, and it looks at throughout the various stages in life, enhancing and practicing executive function skills. And so interestingly, when I looked through this resource again just last night, play and movement and music and dance, games, storytelling across all the different age groups, right? These were really important activities and skills to engage with children on to develop and strengthen executive function. And then in the teen years, they really started looking at strengthening these, what I think we could call self-efficacy skills, when we look at the sort of indicators that are being assessed on the social emotional learning survey that we are distributing to our students, right? So goal setting, planning, right? How do we plan and focus? How do we set goals? How do we set SMART goals that we can achieve little by little over time? And so when we think of strengthening neuroconnections in our brain, we know that comes through practice and repetition, right? And that doesn't mean it has to be boring, rote, repetitious activities, but we know that neuroconnections towards understanding concepts and building capacities happens when they are repeated and strengthened over time. That's why I forcibly share the backwards bicycle brain video with everyone as soon as I can when I meet them, because I reference it all the time. But it's very powerful to remember that practice makes progress, right? And so in the adolescent years, which are really overwhelmed with a preoccupation of our identity, right? Not a lot of future planning is naturally going to occur in those years because we're so busy worrying about who we are in our relationships, who we are in the world, right? And so really focusing on daily practice of identifying your values, setting goals, and then checking back in often to see how we're doing in reaching those goals would strengthen one component of social emotional learning, right? So social emotional learning looks at capacities in children to I don't have the capacity to understand how to use the computer still, but that's fine. So this is the survey that's being, these are the competencies that we're looking at in the social emotional learning survey. And I think it's really interesting to take a moment and just review them. I know you're all familiar with them, and some of you are working with great intention on developing rubrics and systems that are able to incorporate these competencies into your day-to-day work. And so growth mindset obviously is the ability that we can grow with effort, right? So students with a growth mindset, see effort as necessary for success, right? Success isn't going to happen with a snap of a finger. It takes time and effort. Self-efficacy, I think, is really powerful to not only wrap our heads around, but also acknowledge that there's a real thing called learned helplessness, right? Self-efficacy means that we believe in our own ability to succeed, right? And to reach goals that we set for ourselves. It involves confidence in our ability to have some sort of control over our lives. And I think the reality is that many individuals that we come into contact with on a regular basis in any type of human service work, but particularly in education, we know that individuals are struggling really with these capacities to believe that they can achieve their goals, right? Self-management has a lot to do with self-control, self-regulation, right? Regulating our emotions and our behaviors in different situations, again, being flexible. So managing stress and delaying gratification are all important pieces of how we succeed in our day-to-day lives, in our relationships, and of course, long-term in the goals that we set for ourselves. Social awareness is something I think that really at Maricopa County Regional School District in all of our educational settings, that we really focus on taking perspective and understanding diverse backgrounds and cultures and life experiences, right? And so looking at how we weave all of these really are values as well. I know we're all working on mission, vision, and values. All of these really speak to our underlying values here in our school district, right? And so I wanted to just sort of end with this cute yet profound video. Most of you have probably seen it, but it's still fun to watch. So the marshmallow test research was conducted in the mid-'80s, and it really wanted to look at this idea of delayed gratification and if and how being able to delay gratification sort of extended into other indicators of success throughout your life. And so we'll just take a moment to watch this.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow, for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have two. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. I'm gonna go do something, and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. Oh, it smells really good.
All right, so it's up to you. You can have it now or you can wait. Okay? I'll be back. Stay in the chair, okay? Okay. so I'm gonna leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did? You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So they'll tell you to give you another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
All right. So I love how the little girl at the end still picked up after herself. Anyhow, so I think that the point here is that there's lots of capacities that we need to succeed in life, right? And so impulse control and the ability to delay gratification is just one of those. And that it's important for us to instill in others and remind ourselves that success is really taking positive action, right? So long-term success involves understanding that first we can succeed, right? And then being willing to take small steps towards achieving our goals. And so I'll just end with this quote by the legend Michael Jordan, right? That it's important to remember that being willing to try is really the most that we can expect of ourselves and others sometimes. And so I hope you all have a wonderful day. And thank you so much for spending your morning with me.